Hey, what's happening, guys? It's Tyler from Valve News Network, and today I'm going to be talking about all the stuff that was talked about on Geoff Kieliey's GameSlice podcast with Gabe Newell and Erik Johnson. Here we go. So in case you're unaware, Geoff Kieliey just started a new gaming-themed podcast called GameSlice, and I do think that it is a fantastic idea, and as long as he keeps it kind of away from pretty heavy advertising, it can turn into a very great thing. But the first episode of the GameSlice podcast featured an interview with Gabe Newell and Erik Johnson of Valve. The intro of this interview actually had some interesting stuff. Before Geoff Kieliey actually started talking to Gabe Newell and Erik Johnson, there was a couple small sound files about different VR demos that Geoff Kieliey got to experience using Valve's Vive. Most importantly, there was a small sound file from the Portal 2 VR demo that up until this point has not been released to the public.
Hello, Repair Associate, and welcome to the Robot Rehabilitation and Wellness Center. Our records indicate that you are the inaugural participant in our Human Diversity Outreach Program. There is a cabinet of drawers in your repair station. Please locate it and open a drawer.
Apparently, according to Geoff Kieliey, this was a very story-driven Portal 2 small short game thing, where you had to fix a robot with different people telling you what to do, and also GLaDOS was in the demo, according to Geoff Kieliey. But after he played all these small sound clips, he started to talk to Gabe Newell and Erik Johnson themselves. And there were a couple of points that I'm going to talk about, but it doesn't completely replace listening to the podcast itself. This is a really good podcast, and I do recommend going to check it out after the video. Link is in the description. First, Geoff Kieliey talks to Gabe Newell about Valve's entrance into the hardware market and how Valve is actually manufacturing the hardware that they're bringing to the consumers.
Yeah, we were just talking to one of the guys at Flextronics, and they were like, you guys have the most automated consumer electronics manufacturing in the entire United States.
He then kind of digs into the console manufacturers just a slight bit by talking about having absolutely no customability and being locked into a certain system once a console is purchased, and him wanting to change it by being able to bring consumers the ability to customize whatever they build and to be able to upgrade as the technology gets better. Eventually, Geoff Kieliey kind of makes this small comment about a workshop for consumer-made hardware, similar to how Steam has a software workshop in certain games. Gabe then says they absolutely are going to try to embrace this idea, and actually this idea is considered to be a vacation to Gabe himself. VR was one of the main talking points in this podcast, as VR is one of the main talking points with Valve today, and Gabe talks about how the technology is pretty much there for VR, but the killer app for VR is still not there. And there is no way to put something like the development of a killer app on a schedule. But someone at Valve could come up with that killer app. Erik Johnson then states that everyone at Valve is excited to create software content at Valve, specifically for the virtual reality headset. They then go on to explain that DOTA 2 is going to be the testing ground for Source 2 in terms of user-generated content. And soon after the testing ground of DOTA 2 is pretty much complete in the eyes of Valve, they will then release Source 2 in its entirety to the public for any kind of user-generated content to be created. At this point, Gabe gets asked some questions by Geoff Kieliey that have to do with future Valve games. And it is kind of interesting how awkward Gabe gets in terms of talking about any kind of future Valve franchises or just any kind of new future Valve IPs that can be made at all. Gabe was very smooth and easy talking throughout the entirety of this podcast up until this question was asked. And then his statements became segmented and very short. But what he did say was,
every game we've shipped, we've learned a lot. So, I think it's kind of straightforward for gamers to extrapolate, from what we've done in the past to what we're likely to do in the future. Obviously people want to see, if somebody likes Team Fortress, they'd like to see what we can do with Team Fortress or Left 4 Dead or Half-Life.
Yes.
We love all those games. We love all those characters and universes and storylines. And it's, we have no shortage of opportunities. So we try to be a little bit strategic and sort of like, okay, this is the piece of the puzzle that we can solve with this set of technologies that we've developed, and this is the new piece of technology that we think is going to be generally useful, and so this ties up well with this property.
Yeah.
It's like, if you think of it as each one of our franchises represents a tool, and so you just want to pick up the right tool at the right time.
Gabe then seems to get even more uncomfortable when he says the following thing.
I get it. I mean, I'm a fan of TV shows. I'm a fan of writers. I'm a fan of movies. I'm a fan of games, and I certainly understand why people are like, hey, I remember this awesome experience, and I'm starting to get worried that I'm never going to get to have it. We think at the end of the day, customers are going to be really happy with where we spent our time and how we've turned that into entertainment for them.
Now, a statement like that coming from Gabe can actually make a Valve fan kind of hopeful for the future of any kind of Valve product. Problem is, right after talking about everything regarding the future of Valve and the future of whatever's going to be done in terms of software creation and entertainment with Valve, Gabe then says this.
The only reason we'd go back and do like a super classic kind of product is if a whole bunch of people just internally at Valve said, they wanted to do it. If you want to do another Half-Life game and you want to ignore everything we've learned in shipping, Portal 2 and in shipping all the updates on the multiplayer side, that seems like a bad choice. So we'll keep moving forward, but that doesn't necessarily always mean what people are worried that it might mean.
I'm not even going to try to speculate on what Gabe just said. Just please keep in mind that what Gabe just said might be hopeful for Half-Life fans, might not be hopeful for Half-Life fans. He just wants every Valve fan to be able to know that you will not be disappointed where Valve is spending their time. And throughout the rest of the podcast, Geoff Kieliey, Gabe Newell, and Erik Johnson talk about VR, Steam, hardware, all this other cool stuff that Valve is working on. But at the very end of the podcast, Geoff Kieliey asks a question about one of the most difficult things Gabe Newell had to do at Valve. And Gabe Newell talks about the unreleased Valve IP, Stars of Blood, and how it got canceled.
So Ken was working on a project called Stars of Blood. You can sort of get into this mindset that you will kill and destroy anything that gets into your way. And sometimes, that makes it a little bit hard to, people are used to overcoming obstacles. And so, Ken's working on Stars of Blood, and we're like, well, I am saying to Ken, it's like, this isn't sort of coming together. I'm not sure I understand where you're going with this. Ken's like, no, this is awesome. And yet, and eventually like, no, I really, it's like, we're staging an intervention, Ken. You've decided you're going to do an impossible thing, and he's like, okay, I guess I am. I'll just go do VR now.
And lastly, after that, Gabe says that he wishes that all Valve fans will be excited for what they will roll out over the next year or two. Whatever that actually means nothing, but that does kind of mean that something will happen over the next year or two on top of the things that we already know.
They'll get excited with what we're going to be rolling out over the next year or two.
Let's all hope for a new Valve game to be coming out sometime in the next 2 years, and let's hope for the announcement of that game to be this year. But that was all the major information I felt like talking about on this video. Please check out this podcast. Link is in the description. It is fantastic. And if something like this actually takes off, this GameSlice podcast, it could be very good for games journalism and all this extra stuff. It could be very good. So please go check it out and support it, subscribe to it. Link is in the description. I really recommend it. But thank you for watching this video. I have another channel called Nintendo News Network, where I do the same exact thing that you're watching now, except about Nintendo, and there's some exciting stuff happening about Nintendo right now, and I will actually be making that video right after I finish this one. So thank you for watching. As you know, I'm Tyler McVicker. This is Valve News Network. Adios.